the world. And I have learned the following three things, which are very important. And before I tell you what those three are, let me explain to you something about a word called strategy. So before I was the Chief Growth Officer of the group, I was the Chief Strategist of the Publicis Group. And one of the things I was always scared that people would ask me is, what does strategy mean? Okay, we always talk about strategy, but what does strategy mean? And I have three words for strategy. Strategy is future, competitive, advantage. So you have to think about the future for your business, for your brand, for you as a person. You then have to think about, in that future, who are you going to be competing with? And then, versus the people you're going to be competing with, what does your brand, yourself, or your company provide as an advantage to its potential current or future clients? So very simple words: future, competitive, advantage is what strategy is. The world's best strategist is an English writer called William Shakespeare. He's dead now, but if you actually read his writings, you will actually understand that he understands strategy better than anybody else. So in Julius Caesar, the play, he has a line which says, "Take the current when it serves, or prepare to lose thy ventures," which means you have to understand what's happening and align with what's happening. So one of the most important things about success is you as an individual, as a company, or as a brand cannot succeed if you are trying to go left and the entire world is going right. So it's like, for instance, if you wanted to today sell typewriters, even if you're a very good typewriter seller, in a world of mobile phones, word processors, and computers, no one's going to buy typewriters. So there's an underlying trend, and if that trend is your friend, you can succeed. If the trend is not your friend, you won't succeed. So what are the three big global trends? And you'd be quite surprised what some of them are, especially when I tell you the first one. So the first global trend is globalization. Globalization is unstoppable. Now you might ask, how can you say that? How can you say that when there's Brexit? How can you say that when there is our good President Donald Trump, right? How can you say that when there is trade wars right now and tariffs between China and the United States? The reason I say that is because in the last 25 years, more than 2 billion people have come out of poverty because of globalization. And while globalization was a Western idea, it now has been taken up by people all over the world. And today, if you look at all of Europe and Northern America, it has 800 million people. China has 1.2 billion. India has 1.1 billion. The continent of Africa has 1 billion today. We'll have 2 billion in 2050 and 4 billion in 2100. I don't think the West can decide what the future is anymore. So what we're now learning is basically that globalization is now a global idea. And what people are beginning to understand is globalization is both good and bad. And the good of globalization is that it helps certain economies and it's helped certain people. The bad of globalization is it also hurt certain people in certain economies. And those people are now voting against globalization. Not because I think they're against globalization, but because when globalization happens, you sometimes can lose your job. There's lots of other things that happen, and many of these countries have not created a social security net. They do not educate their people. So it's really, they're actually voting against leadership more than they're voting against globalization. So globalization is a trend, and it's going to continue to grow because of the second trend, which is demographics. Demographics simply is, the future is going to basically be mainly Asian, African, and Latin American. The future is going to be brown and Buddhist. When everybody marries, they'll look like us. Okay? And that is an unstoppable trend. You can't stop it because that's where the future is. And if you look at it, the #1 movie this weekend in the United States was a movie people didn't expect to be the #1 movie. It's called Crazy Rich Asians. It's a Hollywood movie without a single Caucasian actor or actress. Not one. Not one. Okay? And it beat every movie. Diversity is here to stay. You can't stop it. And those are demographic trends. So when someone basically says, I have an idea that is not aligned with globalization, or somebody basically says, I have an idea that's not built on demographic diversity, I can tell you that you have already lost. Okay? The third trend is technology. It's the third trend. And technology has been around for a long time. It's been around from the invention of fire. It's been around from the invention of, tools. But what is modern technology has been particularly interesting. And while even computers have been around for a long time and the internet has been around for a long time, technology really took off for all of us who are working in marketing and in business in 1995. Okay? 1995, and I was actually working at, it was then Leo Burnett. And I began to see something, because I bought the first, early in the 80s, I bought the first Macintosh computers and was playing around. And I used to be on things like CompuServe and Prodigy. And I began to realize that there was, and I was working in direct marketing, and I realized that direct marketing could be very powerful, but was very expensive, because you had to buy mailing lists, and you had to buy lists, and you had to do postage. And for many brand marketers, it didn't work. It may work for an automobile, but it didn't work for a lot of people. And I sort of thought to myself, what if some of these costs could disappear? And that's why I was playing around on Prodigy and CompuServe, and I put some of our first clients, like McDonald's and General Motors, on a little company called America Online, before most people knew who America Online was. But even that wasn't the big deal. The big deal was 1995, when you began to have the World Wide Web and the web browser. And for many of you all, if you remember, Netscape and Mosaic and things like that. And that became the first connected age. And what happened then was, the big thing was, you had this thing and you clicked on a link and you went somewhere. So one company called Yahoo tried to organize it like a library. Another company did something different. So there were these two students at Stanford, they had dropped out, and they were reading PhD papers. And when they were reading the papers, they were noticing that the best paper, that whenever they were reading their schoolwork, at the bottom there would be, footnotes, and the footnotes was referring to other papers. And they said, it's interesting, some papers keep showing up. So whenever we're reading some academic journals, they keep referring to some same papers again and again. What happens if on the internet, if you click on a link, the page that has the most links going to it, could that page be more important than other pages? So instead of a librarian deciding what the important page is, can you actually have a computer that says which page, how many pages are going to a page, and show that page when someone hunts for it? That was an algorithm. That algorithm was called PageRank, which is how do you rank the pages. One of the people who wrote that algorithm's name was Larry Page. The other person's name was Sergey Brin. Today, one of the 5 most valuable companies in the world is Google. And that was the first connected age. And that, by the way, changed marketing, because all of a sudden you could actually search for products and services and prices. And that happened in 1995 to 2007. In 2007, something big happened, and that was the second connected age. And in the second connected age, 2 things happened. The first is in a dorm in Harvard and in a conference in Austin, Texas, two new companies were born. One was when Facebook went from being .edu to .com, which is available to everybody versus just to colleges. And a company called Twitter was launched in South by Southwest. I'm giving you the American version. In Chinese, there was Weibo, and before that there was Baidu, etc. But what began to happen is you now had social networks and mobile networks, and that was the second connected age. And the second connected age has been going on for the last 10 years. So now you've got search from the first connected age, mobile, and social. And what has tended to happen is, as a result, all of us have one of these, right? Or we have one of these. Okay. Now, let me give you an idea of the technology inside these. So this is a Apple 10. It has 2 times the processing power of the first space shuttle. So it has more computing power, twice the computing power that was in the first space shuttle. And it was given birth to in September of 2017. This is the Samsung 9. Now these people don't know how to count. They went from Apple 8 to Apple 10. Okay, there was no Apple 9. These people know how to count. The Koreans know how to count. See, the Koreans are better than the Americans in math. So they went from 8 to 9. Okay, so Samsung 9 came out in February of this year. And it has 2.5 times the processing power of the first space shuttle. Why is this important? The reason why this is important is all of us, and especially in this country, and in the country that I grew up in, which is in India, this became the first computer, right? There weren't regular computers. This became the first computer. And this, year by year, there are lots of free Wi-Fi networks. In India, the richest man in India called Mukesh Ambani has given birth to a company called Jio, which basically gives you the first year of data for free, okay? And has basically taken over the entire sort of landscape. And this is what our customers and consumers are now using. But what this gives them, including what gives this to you when you're at home, is it gives you godlike power. So one of the things I tell people is you are no longer marketing to consumers. You are no longer marketing to customers. You are marketing to gods. So when you think when you're at home, when you now have this with you, think of all the things you can do. And so when I talk to marketers, and marketers say, my customer, I'm going to enable my customer, I'm going to empower my customer. My belief is, too late. They're already enabled. They're already empowered. How are you going to satisfy the gods? They're not here to satisfy you. And it is one of the reasons when I go to most of my clients, when I'm downstairs, before I go upstairs, if they're in a building, I look downstairs, and in the garbage, the trash cans downstairs, I open the trash cans. And you know what I find there? Lots of brains, half brains. Because most of my clients, and most of the people who work in my company, leave half their brains downstairs when they go to work. They take the other half of the brain when they leave and go home. So when I look at presentations and I hear how people behave, my thing is, who behaves like that? Who wants to have a relationship with a brand when I happen to have very little time to have relationships with people? When you tell me that you care about me, but I know that you actually are valuing me on my net present value. You talk about being authentic, and my whole stuff is, I know everything about your company and your employees. I look it up on Glass Ceiling and Glassdoor and on LinkedIn. So who are you talking to? It is because of the second connected age that all the major companies in the world are having major challenges. Because we keep thinking that consumers are waiting for us. when they are saying, we are gods, what are you going to do for us? And companies that have been given birth after 2007 have recognized that to a great extent. So if you sort of think about Airbnb, Uber, a whole bunch of other things, they're all built on this. You couldn't do Uber if you didn't have this, right? And so one of the key things is, I always ask our own company and I ask our clients, are you really talking about real people or some fantasy person? And how do real people behave? They behave like you behave at home. And your kids behave at home. They don't behave like some person that no one actually understands. And that is what is transforming marketing. What's transforming marketing is we're living in a global world with major demographic shifts, with people who are highly empowered. And 10 years after the second connected age, it is taking over all parts of media and marketing and business like never before. And at speeds that are absolutely extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. And what that does is it changes the way marketing gets done. So here are some things that I have learned globally about brands and marketing. So the first is, marketing is going to be more important in the future than it has ever been before. So the business that all of us are in is fortunately a good business. Why is it going to be more important? The reason it's going to be more important is because marketing is about understanding and meeting customer requirements. That was the definition I learned from Philip Kotler, who wrote the book on marketing. But what happened is, for years and years, and I worked for some of the best companies like you all, right? I've worked for lots of big companies. Over the years, I realized that most of us didn't actually have to listen to customer requirements. That through a combination of distribution and pricing and arbitrage and information control, we knew how to market. But now God is who we are marketing to. So meeting requirements of God become very important, and marketing becomes important. And so I'm going to ask a very simple question. All of us, and many of you all, are working in some of the leading marketing companies in the world. All of your companies basically say how important the customer is, the consumer is, the person is, the member is, right? Okay, now let me go to your boardroom. Who do I see in your boardroom when I go to visit boardrooms? I see a CEO, that's good. I see somebody who's in charge of technology or information. A CTO, a CIO is usually in the board. I see someone who's in charge of money, which is a CFO. I see someone who is in charge of administration or law, and it could be a chief administrative officer, a chief legal officer, something like that on the board. Who don't I see on the board?
Sino.
A chief marketing officer. So you're lying. How come, if the customer and consumer is the most important person in the world, there is nobody who represents their voice? Right? Well, the people will say, well, we're a marketing company, our CEO is a marketing person. I said, yes, we got one of those, and then who else you got? So I believe that it's time for marketing and marketers to stand up and take over their companies. Because if not, your customer will run away. Because they're going to go to companies who look after them. And that is the most single important thing that I would say, because marketing is going to be more important in the future, and it's time that marketers and marketing stand up. The second thing that's more important in the future than ever before is a thing called brands. Brands are actually more important, and every study I've seen from Interbrand to brand valuation, brands are becoming more important rather than less important. Why? Because brands are the ultimate navigation devices in a world of fragmentation. It's more important than ever before. The reason why ESPN is called just ESPN is because 10, 15 years ago I sat with the CEO of ESPN Just before he was thinking of calling ESPN magazine something different, and ESPN1 and ESPN2, two different things. And I said, look, you got one brand, just call it ESPN. Don't confuse the hell out of the world, right? And he still remembers, he's now retired, that, you know, he didn't send me any money though. But you know that this is so brands are very, very important because they're ultimate navigation devices. So therefore what we all do, what you all do, which is marketing and brands are more important. But the way marketing and brands are built is different. And that's why we will have to learn and change and do new things. So how are they different? And that's what I'm going to focus a little bit about. So the first is, let's remember we are marketing to gods, or we are marketing to people, and we are not only marketing to consumers or customers or members. Why? The reason is, if you look at someone only as a customer, or as a consumer, or as a member, you only see a small part of their life. And today, that small part may not be enough to actually succeed. Because you're looking at the world through the lens of your brand. But that's not the way people look at the world. So you have to look much more broader. So that's the first thing that's different. The second is the way you build a brand today is different than it used to be built in the past. In the past, you could build a brand through a combination of advertising, distribution, and promotion and merchandising. You could do that. When I worked, and I know there are people in L'Oreal here, but so don't hold your nose. I began my career when I was in Procter, when at Leo Burnett working on Procter & Gamble, and I proved that the increased share of their toothpaste had nothing to do with anything but increased distribution in Walmart. Because in the 80s, the Walmart distribution was growing and it was shipping to Walmart. And I said, that's 75% of the correlation. Don't tell me about anything else. So you could actually build, right? You could actually build stuff through distribution, promotion, and marketing. And that was power. Today, those are still very important. But you have to think about utilities and services and experiences and a lot of other stuff, positive word of mouth, very different things. So Jeff Bezos, who some of us like to hate and some of us like to love, basically said there are two types of companies. There are companies who basically spend 30% of their time creating products and services and 70% of their time shouting about it, and others that spend 70% of their time creating products and services and 30% of the time telling people about it. They said that Amazon is the second type of company. I think the future is much more about the second type of company, which is if you have a good product, service, utility, and you respect the customers, they will spread the message for you. So one of the key things is we have to think not only about advertising and media and promotion and distribution, all are critical and important, but we have to think about what's the utility, the service, the experience that we're actually giving people. So the way brands are built is different. So customers, less customers, more people and gods. Think broadly about how brands get built. The third is scale. So scale is something I've been thinking a lot about because I work for a company that is very large. We work for clients who are very successful and very large. And everybody wants to grow big, and scale is important. So I've been thinking about what if scale was not important? Okay, now, by my very nature, if you tell me red, I will build a case for blue. Okay, just that's the way I am. So if someone says, let's go left, I'll say, no, let me see why we shouldn't go right. So when everybody was talking about scale, I said, maybe scale isn't so good. And I've decided that actually some scale is good, but there's new types of scale that we're not paying attention to. And big companies hiding behind scale of one type, which is important, but they're not understanding scale of another type, which is becoming more important than the scale they have. So what do I mean? So if you think about old scale, there are 4 types of things that are important in scale. Scale of distribution. How broadly do you have distribution? Scale of manufacturing. Do you get price efficiencies, etc.? Scale of spending. Can you get lower prices? Can you get special, deals? Can you get ads at the Super Bowl and Oscars? Right? And scale of number of people you have. How many people do you have globally? Staff. So the different types of scale, but I'll give you those 4 as scale. Scale of manufacturing, scale of distribution, scale of spending power, and scale of resources and people. All those are important, but they're becoming less and less. So 2 weeks ago, more than 2 weeks ago, for many years, we have 2 older daughters. And for some strange reason, when they were growing up, they were watching the show, and every time I'd go in once in a while when I would be with them, I'd say, "What's that? That's the most stupid thing I've seen in my life." And they said, "Dad, you understand nothing. These are very smart men." And I said, "They are stupid." And they were watching this show about the Kardashians, Kim Kardashian, Kylie Jenner. I said, "This is the stupidest thing. Our brains are rotting. Let me leave." Okay. So 2 weeks ago, I read Forbes magazine on who is the fastest growing billionaire in history. And it ain't Mark Zuckerberg. It's a 21-year-old lady called Kylie Jenner. And Kylie Jenner has built a company, and I know the people here in L'Oreal and others would probably know, has built a company in 18 months from 0 to $900 million of revenue. It's called Kylie Cosmetics, and she sells apparently lipsticks. So I studied a little bit about this company. And here's what I discovered. Scale, right? So let's think about scale of resources. How many people does Kylie Cosmetics have? Number of employees of Kylie Cosmetics, $900 million of revenue, 5. 5. Is that right? Spending power, 0. Only media channel is Instagram, but no advertising. Kylie Jenner has 120 million followers on Instagram, which is more than the top 12 rated television shows in America combined. Scale of manufacturing, none. She basically has it outsourced to a company, I think called Pure Beauty or something, I forget the name of the company. Right? Scale of logistics and other support. All her e-commerce and everything else is done by a company called Shopify. So it basically gets 0.2% of her sales. For every dollar she sells, she basically makes 27% of pure profit. That's OI. 5 people, $1 billion. Scale. There's a new scale, and that's the scale you have to think about. I'm not saying old scale is bad scale, but there's new scale. The first scale and the new scale is the scale of data and networks. So what you saw there was the scale of networks. The fact that she has 120 million followers is an amazing network. Other companies have scale of data, which is what Uber and a whole bunch of other companies have. So you've got scale of data and scale of networks is a new type of scale. The second is scale of influence, which is people now listen to certain people, just like they listen to particular spokespeople that you'll have, more than they listen to other people. Because in today's age, it's very hard. They quickly figure out, are you authentic? Are you purposeful? Are you transparent? If not, I won't believe you. As importantly is so you've got the scale of data, scale of networks, the scale of influence, and then you basically have to have also the scale of talent and ideas. And we've forgotten that in the business. Here's my basic belief. We're living in a technology age, and in a technology age, superior talent wins. All the time. We are living in a world where most countries, interest rates are very low. Which means capital is in excess supply. Why is it that all of us are trying to cut capital spending or investments when the only thing that actually makes a difference is talent? And so I keep asking people, do you want to buy the world's best archers or the cheapest arrows? You give me a team of great archers with a few arrows, I'll kill everybody. You can buy a bunch of people who are useless archers and give them 55 goddamn arrows, they won't kill anybody. And that's the thing to sort of think about. There's a completely new way of thinking about scale. And the new modern companies are thinking about it. I'm not saying old scale is bad, but just think about what's being born today. Right? These are companies who are starting to use the old scale as a disadvantage. These are companies that are too big, not agile enough, still based on old thinking. And that's one of the key things that we have to sort of think about. I'm going to sort of end with a couple of things that we've sort of learned over the years on two different things. So what should we do about it? And there are two ways of doing things about it. The first is, what should we do about it as companies? And the second is, what should we do about it as people? And I'm going to talk a little bit about companies, since all of us work at companies and companies pay us and we love companies because we need our jobs, right? But I'm going to talk about what are modern companies looking like. So the first is, modern companies are people obsessed. They're obsessed about people. Not just people as customers, but about who are the people they will partner with, how do they look after their own talent. Because what's very interesting that people don't realize is, remember there's all this research that says, I believe people like me, which is why social media influence is so important. I'm more likely to believe people like me than I'm likely to believe a marketer. You know who people believe more than people like me about a marketer? Is employees of that company. I truly believe that the single biggest brand grower in America are the employees of our clients' companies and the partners of our clients' companies. The reason why Costco for years did better than Walmart, even though they paid their people twice as much, is because they're happier people. The reason Starbucks is different than other people is because they look after the health benefits. And so my whole basic belief is the employees, the people who work for a company, the partners of the people who work for the company, as well as the customers of the company, have to be people obsessed. If you forget being people obsessed and you are dollar obsessed, you have already lost. Amazon was people obsessed. They were not dollar obsessed. All the modern companies are people obsessed, and we have become dollar obsessed. Very strange. So that's the first thing. Second is, modern companies tend to basically be friction free. One of the things when I went to the University of Chicago, There was a professor, he had died, but we read his books. Why do firms exist? All of us work in companies, right? What happens inside a company? Drama, politics, silos. So he asked, why do companies exist? And what he discovered was companies exist because external friction is greater than internal friction. That even though you have all this drama, it's not as bad as having to put all of this together. However, in a networked age, more and more companies are becoming platform-driven and like Hollywood studios, where people are coming together. Therefore, for modern companies to succeed, you have to eliminate internal friction as much as possible. Have less silos, have incentive systems to get people to work together. Those are sort of modern companies. The third is, increasingly companies can't do it all. No one company can do it all. What's interesting is whether it's Google or Facebook or Amazon, they're increasingly outsourcing versus insourcing. Major marketers are doing exactly the opposite, which makes no sense. Because as I've always basically said, you can't fire yourself, you can't have diversity, and you can't have agility of change. We're living in a modular world, right? So it's basically like going to the world of CDs when you were not only in iTunes, but you're now in Spotify. And so the whole idea is, in a networked world, you need networked relationships, which is extremely important. And the last thing is, the successful companies are data-driven storytellers. So data is extremely important, but they're data-driven storytellers. Because what tends to happen, data alone isn't important. And I don't think any marketer, including any of you all, by the way, I will tell you that, including the L'Oreals and the Procter & Gamble's and the Samsungs or anybody, nobody has enough information to make any real decision without having lots of other information. Because most client information is dated and is only about that brand or service when it should be about people. So with the exception of maybe Amazon, Google, and Facebook, no one has enough data to actually understand anything. In fact, it can mislead you. But a lot of it can be very useful to tell stories about your brand. And so the whole idea is, what's a data-driven storyteller? So future companies tend to be people-obsessed, they tend to be friction-free, they tend to be modular and networked, and they tend to be data-driven storytellers. And if you look at the last few successful companies which I've been focusing on, that's the themes I'm seeing. So those are, sort of future transformative companies. Those are some of the things that we're trying in our own silly, small way, Publicis Group, as we have, since I helped write the strategy and we're reorganizing ourselves and everything else, is in order for us to remain relevant and to make sure that we have clients in the future, we better change, because otherwise we won't have anybody. With that being said, the single most important thing that I have learned is, in the end, even if you are very senior in your company, you can't control anything. Okay? The only person you can control is yourself. And one of the biggest things that I have learned over the years, and literally today, with the exception of 2 people, it's because I'm totally unemployable. I just finished 36 years in the same company. And so people say, like, how come you stayed in the same place for 36 years? I said, because nobody hired me for 36 years. I've been forced to stay in the same company. That could be one reason. Another reason, which is much more truer, is I hate change. So when everybody basically says change is good, you know what I tell them? You change, I'm happy. Right? Change sucks. It's really hard, especially for people like you and for people like myself. You all are senior and talented, and I'm senior. But what tends to basically happen is, when you're senior and you have to learn new things, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Right? So you don't do it. You fake it. Right? And you don't actually do it yourself. And at some particular stage, you don't realize you get irrelevant. And the most important thing, what I've basically learned, is the more I want things to stay the same, the more I will have to change. So the only reason I change is because I want to stay in the same place. Right? And I want to keep my job. in a very strange way. And oddly, my colleagues, many of my colleagues who were very successful, refused to change, don't have their job. I who changed and who hate it, right? And I'll tell you how much I hate it. I worked for the same company for 36 years. I've had the same 2 bosses for 20. I've lived in the same city for 38, and I met my wife when we were 12 years old. That's how much I hate change. And I'm supposed to be one of the drivers of change over the last 10, 15 years of this company, right? Therefore, how do I do it? So those are 3 things I would end with for you. First is, try to spend 1 hour a day or 7 hours a week learning. The world is changing so fast that you have to learn. Now you'll say, okay, this guy clearly doesn't do anything. I'm a very important person. I have lots of things. But you are saying to yourself, this guy doesn't do anything. He can spend 7 hours learning a week. I have no time for this shit, right? I think you can find 7 hours to learn if you do 2 hours on a weekend or whatever. And what do I learn? What I learn is I go every day and someone tells me something. And actually, I do it in an old-fashioned way. While I have a phone, I actually have a little notebook. And people tell me stuff, and I'm constantly writing down stuff, and say, I don't understand what the hell they're saying, but I'm writing it down, right? Sometimes I am, and then I go and I search on Google and other places. I try to learn what's going on, right? So yesterday, I went on a tour, and I took 3-4 pages on Mexican history, right? I said, I didn't know that, I didn't know that, I didn't know that. Learning can be about lots of other things. You can learn about different cultures. It doesn't have to be about technology. It can be about lots of different things. But it's about things you don't know. And especially go learning stuff where people tell you you're stupid, which for me is easy, it's every day, right? Because that's how you grow. And that's one of the things to do. The second is, it's very, very important to not take yourself very seriously. You all don't know this, but you all actually, somewhere along the way, because you all became senior and important, people stopped actually talking to you. They started actually telling you what you wanted to hear. Okay? And I find that that is the world's worst thing, because companies fail when they begin to happen to have cultures that don't allow someone to say, hopefully you'll have finished eating. One of the lines I say is, that is not a brownie on the table, that is a turd on the table. Okay? And a turd is a piece of shit. Okay? And to give you an idea, I'm often in meetings where I say, like, why are we talking? Why isn't someone talking about what the real issue here is? Well, no, people will get upset. Wells Fargo, one of the best banks in America, for the last 3 years has been in a tailspin, because that entire company basically was selling accounts to people who didn't need accounts. Because no one was willing to speak up that it was the stupidest thing in the world to do. And when you try to understand that, why? It's because senior leadership scares the bejesus out of your people. And scares people out of everyone else. And so no one actually tells you the truth. And one day, you suddenly realize, oh my God, the world is not flat, it's round. But it's too late. Right? So go out of your way to try to create a culture where someone tells you the truth. Now you all may have everyone telling you the truth. Like in my case, everyone tells me how stupid I am. I wish they would not tell me that. But you must realize that. And third and most important, and I will end with this, is I'm a big believer in people/customers, consumers, members. I'm a big believer in marketing, and I'm a big believer in brands, right? Which is, I'm a big believer in what all of you all do, which is you all look after brands, you are marketers dealing with people. Therefore, I end with a very simple question, which is, if that's true, why don't you build yourself your own brand? Because I'm now increasingly beginning to believe that we're living in a world where you have to become your own brand. And so I'm going to end with one final thought. It's in English, unfortunately, but I'm sure there's a translator thing. If you go to a site which is just launched. It's called RishadTobaccowala.com. Okay, so I built a brand outside of Publicis Media, or outside of Publicis, because I began to realize if you're an independent brand in today's world, you can actually do things. But on that, you will actually see speeches or videos, but more important, you will see where my Twitter, Facebook, and other feeds are, and my own blog, where I basically talk about things like scale, the future of invention, the future of marketing, etc. So everything I learn, I share with people, right? But if you go there, including there's an exercise on how to build a brand. And so I would like to basically say thank you for giving us the opportunity to build your brand, and hopefully we can help you build your brand. Thank you.
I don't have a mic so I have to speak from here.
Thank you so much, Rishad.
And